Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to HendosHotTopics. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good week. Hope you're loving yourself. Today we have Richie Hardcore joining us. Welcome, man.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Now, I like to ask is how are you doing in general?
I'm doing really good. Yeah, man. Life's really nice right now. My partner and I, we had a baby 5 weeks ago.
Yep.
So being just adjusting to the new rhythm of life with an infant in my life, and I just finished my master's thesis, which I've been working on for 2.5 years. So that's like quite a weight off my mind to finally submit that. And yeah, I train athletes and stuff. So working with them, everything's going really well right now, man. Thank you.
Masters is, that's someone who's striving for excellence. That's the top dog of it all.
There's a PhD after that.
Oh, okay.
Right. So you could do your doctorate. But yeah, it's postgraduate education. Yeah.
How have you felt building up to that, and now you said it's weight off your shoulders, but how have you felt amongst that, pushing to the finish line?
I feel like if I was a more organized person, I probably would have made it easier for myself.
Yeah.
But I decided to go back to do my master's in 2020.
Yep.
And then I had like one of the worst years. Like a lot of really difficult stuff happened in my personal life within the broader environment of COVID-19 and everything shutting down. So the first year of it was I didn't really achieve much, but built up steam over time and just chipped away at it. And then I really felt like I didn't get proper immersed in it towards the end of the writing process. But it was really positively beneficial, and it deepened my knowledge of my subject. And I'm really glad to have done it. I think it's like a lot of things that I've found is like I'll do it and then I'll think back like, oh, how could I have done that better? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then I kind of wish I had the opportunity to do it again. Yeah. But I'm curious to see what the initial examiners say about it, and then they send you feedback and you get a chance to tweak it and then resubmit it. So yeah, that's in about 3 or 4 months. So yeah, see what they say. Hopefully it was worth the time.
So it's just a waiting game now.
You know what? Like, to say I hope it was worth the time, whatever the outcome is it was worth the time, because I learned a lot. And I enjoyed the process, and I flexed my mind, and I read super broadly and widely. And I'm not just like more knowledgeable about the subject area. I'm like a better person for it. I think often I was talking to a friend of mine who's an MMA fighter the other day, and she just lost. And I was telling her, yo, great job. You're super inspiring. She said, oh, I don't feel very inspiring. And I said, well, I think like it's actually like the journey that is the inspiring part. Yeah. It's not the outcome. That's just like the icing on the cake, right? And unfortunately, that's what people see. No, people don't see you like getting home from work and then writing till 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. while your kid's sleeping. Or they don't see you getting up early to go to training, or they don't see all the behind the scenes stuff. And so we have like a results focused society, when really I think a lot of what's truly inspiring is, it's what happens in the dark,
100%. Yeah. And I fully agree with what you said there. And even yourself, like you just said, it's the journey that mattered the most, and you learned a lot. But the fact that, especially starting in 2020, when the world was the way it was,
I didn't know it was going to turn.
But the fact you were able to push through that and still find the motivation to keep going, that's really admirable, and you should be proud that proud of yourself for doing that. That's a real make or break moment, not just with what was going on, but when times get tough, it's a lot of people tend to find the shortcuts of it's tough now. There's no point doing it. But the reward at the end for a personal benefit is so much more greater when you've pushed through the struggles and you've found ways to overcome the challenges you're confronted by.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's something I learned. I used to be a fighter for a long, long time, and now I'm a coach, amongst other things. But yeah, I think that's one thing I learned from fighting. Like I started fighting really young, and there's lots of like pitfalls and injuries and mental challenges, and the lessons I took from a lifetime of, competitive fighting are really transferable to anything, Yep. So, yeah, no, you're right, bro.
Now, we'll touch on the Richie now and later on in the episode. I want to ask is, what was it like for Richie growing up?
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot. You know, like I grew up out West Auckland, out here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I guess like a lower middle class, working class sort of environment. And what really coloured my childhood was my father's struggles with alcoholism and mental health. And so it was, you know, it wasn't the worst of the worst, but it was a pretty dysfunctional childhood, and that made me a pretty insecure kid a lot of the time. And I had a whole bunch of issues that fell out of that, I guess, as I've uncovered as I've grown up. You know, like you can't articulate any of this when you're 12, 15, 25, you know. It's not until you've gone through life and you can have a retrospective reflection that I was doing this because of this, you know what I mean? But yeah, a lot of that sort of those childhood patterns played out in, you know, my relationships or my own mental health as I moved through adulthood, right? But I'm also grateful that I got into sports really young. And I guess I'm proud of myself for making good choices too. Like I had a lot of drugs and alcohol around me real young, not just at home, but you know, the people I gravitated towards. You know, when you grow up with dysfunction, you often feel comfortable and at home and alive around dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
So like I always hung with like the misfits and the kids who didn't fit in or the kids who were outside the box, and with that came like drugs and alcohol and lots of like risk-taking behavior. And even amongst all of that, I didn't choose that. You know, I always was pretty like anti-drugs, anti-alcohol. While I experimented very cautiously here and there, I kind of went against the grain. And then started hanging out with a crew of dudes who explicitly rejected alcohol and drugs and rejected sort of what was expected of mainstream society, right? This whole subculture that I found through music, this you know, I got really into like punk and hardcore and metal and hip hop from a very young age. And then within the hardcore music scene, there's this whole I guess youth movement that was called straight edge,
right? Yep.
And it fell out of like the Washington, New York hardcore scene. And there's a singer called Ian McKay. He had this band Minor Threat, and he articulated that being sober was actually like being punk, right? Like everyone's getting, can I swear on your podcast?
Yeah, good, man.
Everyone's getting fucked up and wasted and doing drugs and like doing that self-destructive sort of thing, thinking it's rebellious. It's actually not. It's actually very conformist behavior. And while I understand that, because life is hard and existing is difficult, and wanting to escape from that reality or to loosen up or have more fun, or you know, it can, if you're experimenting carefully with psychedelics, can open your mind perhaps. But most people aren't like sitting around doing shamanic rituals. They're sniffing coke off like bathroom toilets, or like shelving fucking Molly at a party, or drinking till they puke up, right? Like, so I always was around that, and I always thought it was whack. And then I found these older dudes who had like tattoos and a cool style, and they'd been to America when I was like a 16, 17, 18. And I was like, oh, yo, these guys are cool, man. And they were like cool mentors and role models for me. Yeah, I went to New York for the first time when I was 19 years old and just hung out in the hardcore scene. Went to see bands every weekend, and just was surrounded by these cool older dudes who didn't glorify intoxication. They glorified critical thinking, really, if I think about it, and standing in your own truth, even if no one else is doing that. Yeah, so I was just grateful to have cool older dudes around me in the music culture that I became part of. And then with fighting with martial arts, like a lot of the men there were cool mentors in that they taught me how to work hard, how to sacrifice, how to apply myself. They gave me like a healthy space to express myself. I think fighting is misunderstood as violence, because obviously there is violence involved, I suppose, in the the physical aspect of it, but I really think like fighting is a form of self-expression, right? And it gave me a place to do that. That was healthy.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of guys have a lot of difficult feelings, and that manifests in violence in the street, or violence in the home, or violence against themselves with alcohol and drugs, or self-harming behaviors, right? But I got to put it in honorable combat, you know? And those two things really like put me on a good track for life. And now I'm older, I like to give back, you know?
Yeah.
Like to train young people and all this.
Now, I love that what you said about the older guys you started hanging with, became mentors. Was it because they were in that mindset now where they're like, okay, no, we're gonna take a step away from the societal image of young guys, especially having to drink on the weekends and get on the drugs and all that kind of stuff, because they had experienced that around them like yourself, and they're like, actually, no, I want to push myself away and live my own life.
I'm not. That's a really good question, Jack. I don't know, man. Like, I think a couple of them had been around like some of the excesses of party culture.
Yep.
And thought it was whack and rejected it. But then also like, not all of them. Like some of them have just looked at things on an objective level, as far as I could tell, and were like, yeah, that's actually stupid. Like, who benefits from alcohol culture? Multi-billion-dollar international agencies. Who benefits from coke or other drugs? Like illicit drug dealers who, while on a street level, I understand the need to sell drugs to survive and feed your family. A lot of people who are involved in illicit economies come from really difficult backgrounds. They might be excluded from society through a whole range of structural means, and that needs to be considered as a causative of the black market economy, right? But like, you're still selling, when you buy coke, like, you are deliberately choosing to give money to people who kill people, who like 100%. Fucking blow up buildings, and like babies get killed. Like, go look at the news in Mexico or Colombia or Latin America or parts of the United States, right? Like, that's driven by consumers.
Even 40 years ago when it was at its worst, you know?
Yeah, well, it's not, 40 years ago wasn't its worst. 40 years ago was like the outset of that sort of stuff, right? Like the war on drugs started in the 1970s with Richard Nixon, right? But so American foreign policy towards Latin America, where a lot of, well, if we're talking about cocaine, drug in particular, comes from, like, it's just exacerbated the problem. What you would, if you really wanted to combat drugs, you have to accept that people are always going to want to do drugs. Yeah. Not all drug use is harmful. If you decriminalized drugs or even legalized drugs and made them as boring as buying a bottle of water, I think you do a lot more to reduce drug use rather than keeping it illegal, which means that the profits are really high and criminal entities are always going to have a profit motive to keep doing what they do, right? Which is like destabilizing whole countries, right? And at the same time, like on the demand side of things, it's like, why do so many people want to get fucked up all the time, right? Like, most drug use isn't problematic. Like, sure, you get a hangover, you argue with your partner, you're not the best parent, maybe you miss a day at work. Once in a while, these are reasonably benign, right? But the extreme end of drug use is hugely detrimental to individuals, families, communities, and indeed society as a whole, right? Yeah. Those are the people that need proper support. It takes like months to get into a rehab center in New Zealand. And that's similar around the world, right? Like, governments really need to step up and do a better job at funding addiction treatment providers, right? It's this multifaceted issue. Right? I'd love it if, like, mainstream culture didn't glorify alcohol and drug use. At the same time, I think we need these massive legislative changes to legalize and decriminalize most drugs. And then you have the treatment provision as well. Why? Mental health too, man. Like, fuck, society's hard to get along in, man. Like, everything's expensive, cost of living's going up, housing is scarce. You know, social media is flooding us with crazy ideas and like bad news a lot of the time. Doesn't have to, but it does. You know, clickbait media. It's understandable people want to escape from that through intoxication. If you want to address that, you're not going to do it by putting people in jail.
100%.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
So it's a very complicated topic, and I feel like no one does it justice because they want black and white answers. You know?
Well, even like you see there with mental health, it correlates. If someone's struggling with alcohol or drugs and they're trying to get into rehab, it's a weight. With mental health, especially when it's youth, it's kids who are below 15. Wanting support, wanting to get that help, it's the exact same. It's the struggle to get in. It's too expensive. They can't find the funds to get it. And that's why the likes of Mike King and I Hope are fundraising, because the government's not doing their part to help these kids who are unfortunately taking their lives because they can't find the help or feel like there isn't enough accessible help for them to find help, to have a space to express themselves, to feel heard and felt wanted and felt needed in the society that surrounds them. You touched there with social media. I'm really afraid even more for the younger generation. My generation, that it
Bro,
wasn't.
you are the younger generation.
Yeah,
You're a young man.
Look, my siblings and my younger sister, like her generation is. I'm even seeing it now with kids in primary now. Is you go on social media and you can, the older kids, we see it as, you can diffuse the expectations of which are realistic and which aren't, that are being put on. You scroll through, you see all these superstars and 17-year-old stars on TikTok and all this stuff. They're setting these expectations for people, and when they feel that they're not living that life or not meeting the same expectations, they might be the same age as them but not in the same position. They're like, well, what the fuck's the point of me even trying? Why am I here? If they can do it and I can't, what can I do? I must be useless.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, social media. There's a social psychologist called Jonathan Haidt who talks about this a lot, and who every time I do a conversation like this, I always find myself referencing. But he's right, and researchers like himself. There's Gene Twenge, who wrote a book called iGen. They will show you the empirical studies that talk about the rise in social media use with the rise in anxiety, depression, self-harm behaviors. Yep. Particularly like young girls who have a lot more social pressures to be beautiful and to perform a certain way. And there's this culture of comparison, like you're talking about, Jack. But increasingly too, I meet young men who have like body image issues because they can't look like a face-tuned professional athlete on TikTok. All right. I don't think social media is inherently bad. Like, it's brought me a lot of good things in my own life, and whether that's friendships or I've met, I don't know, cool people or work opportunities. Like a lot of my business comes off the back of social media, and my business is very community focused. But at the same time, online bullying, trolling, cancel culture, this culture of comparison, the constant need for like dopamine and dopamine depletion that comes from being online all the time. All right, like that's detrimental, man. I think on a macro level too, I think social media has spread really radical concepts far and wide and further polarized society, right? So on a macro political level, people can't even recognize one another in the same society anymore. And I really worry about that, because the further that we move away from an orbit around a center, the more political violence we're going to get. The more conspiratorial thinking, the loneliness epidemic that a lot of researchers talk about. Social media plays a big role in that, and I think we need to figure out how to address that.
100%. Yeah, no, the thing I think is a bigger issue in terms of personal well-being in Haroa is the validation sense. The validation of it moves from validating yourself from maybe getting an award at school to doing well on an exam to moving to, okay, this girl in my school got 100 likes on her post, I only got 50. Oh, I just got a like, well, I got a DM. It's that dopamine from that dinging sound or that notification when your screen lights up.
Yeah, totally, bro. And that drives like more and more extreme shit too, right? Like, what do I need to do to cut through all the noise? You know, like social media is such a crowded space, right? And you see that in mainstream news. It's like, all right, what's the most inflammatory headline that I can post? What will get the most clicks? No one actually reads the article for the nuance. Do you know what I mean? And even the way copy's written in media these days is very inflammatory, you know? And it's generational too. Like, you see the young graduates come out of, journalism school or whatever, and they have a particular worldview, and that filters through into the media, which filters through to people who potentially aren't critically filtering what they're consuming, right? And that just leads to more and more extreme ideas, and that's bad, I would argue. I agree, mate. And I want to say is that if you do scroll through social media and you do question and compare yourself, is that you're enough. You know, you're enough with who you are and what you do, and try not to tunnel vise your life on what you see on your screen. You know, that doesn't justify who you are. Just because they've got this doesn't mean that your life isn't as good. And it's a real hard thing when all you see around us is screens and models everywhere and all that kind of stuff. But you're enough, you know, and I can't say enough, is you're enough, and I hope you do realise that. Now, I'd love to speak to you about White Ribbon New Zealand. For those who don't know what White Ribbon New Zealand is, would you mind explaining it? Yeah, sure. So White Ribbon started in Canada in 1991. I think it was 1991. There'd been a massacre at a polytechnic. I think it was in Montreal. Sorry, I should know that.
That's all right.
I believe the guy's name was Mark Le Pen. He stormed into a polytechnic, separated the room by sex, men and women, and murdered all the women in a self-declared war on feminism. And a group of Canadian men got together and they articulated that gendered violence is a male problem, like disproportionately in family harm. It is male perpetrators against women and children, right? And that's not because men are destined to be violent, but it's because there's a whole socialization process that goes on with being born a boy, right? We socialize boys in a whole range of ways to repress their emotions. We validate risk-taking behavior and aggression. We invalidate sensitivity and vulnerability. You know, we expect boys to pursue status at all costs, to be sexually promiscuous, to have a disdain for femininity and homosexuality, and it's a very constrictive social idea about what being a quote-unquote real man is, right? And that plays out in lots of ways in real life, right? As we all try and perform our masculinity to all the people around us. And to that end, White Ribbon was tasked with helping boys and men be non-violent and stop violence against women, right? Like, violence against women is an endemic problem.
Yeah.
You know, 1 in 3 women are going to be a victim of some form of family or sexual violence within their lifetime. The least safe place for a woman is the family home. All right, these are undeniable truths. These are statistics that you can read anywhere. You know, World Health Organization, whoever, right?
Yep.
You know, go through any government, it's the same. And I'm speaking in the Western world too, right?
Yep.
Like, I haven't spent my time looking at Southeast Asia or Africa, or I'm talking about them, I guess. The global West. And so White Ribbon New Zealand fell out of that, right? Like, White Ribbon spread across the world. November 25th every year is White Ribbon Day, and it's about encouraging men to speak up, step out, stand up against gender violence.
Yep.
And that looks a lot of different ways. Some men grow up in violent households, and they recreate what they've absorbed, and they don't have the tools to navigate relationships non-violently. So they need counseling and therapy and behavior change programs, which are sadly very few and far between. And they're also very opaque. They're very hard to find. But a lot of men are violent, and that violence is inexcusable, but at the same time, they're victims too. So how do you help them unlearn what their childhood has taught them in order for them to break that cycle so their own children don't go on to be violent, right? And when we talk about violence, I really want to pause and point out that it's not just like physical violence, punching people and choking people and, you know, raping your partner, because that happens. It's also incessantly telling your partner that they're no good, or controlling their social media and who they can hang out with, and not letting them go to work, and not letting them get a driver's license, and, you know, like not letting them have a normal agency, right? It's this whole process that they call coercive control. You know, there's a journalist in Australia who I've done some work with, and I'm a big fan of, called Jess Hill. She's really worth checking out if you're interested in this topic. Yeah, so there's that end of things, but then it's like more culturally, how do boys and men acculturate one another, right? How do we police each other's behavior? And that teaches like male dominance in a relationship. How do we help one another not say stupid jokes like bros before hoes, or why do we just not blink an eye at the normalization of words like bitches? I'm just, you know, caught up with these bitches, you know, like like why do we not question that? And what is the value transmission when we use language like that uncritically? You know, when we constantly use sexist slurs, and we continue to say things like don't be gay, don't be a homo, don't be soft, don't throw like a girl, don't be a pussy, that continues to delegitimize women and things that we consider feminine, like homosexuality, right? And we shouldn't do that, because being gay doesn't mean that you're any less fucking awesome than being straight. And being female doesn't mean that you're any less awesome than being male. And yet we continue to sort of like valorize this very rigid notion of heterosexual masculinity over everything else. And that's to the detriment of everyone, including heterosexual men, right? Like, we are fucking killing ourselves in record numbers. We are underperforming in schools. We are more likely to end up in prison, to die in car accidents. We're the biggest perpetrators of homicide and the biggest victims of homicide, right? And that's all quite preventable over time. It's not just cultural. It's not just like policing one another's language. It's like, where do we give boys and men a place to like do what I did and fucking express my emotions healthily through sport? Doesn't have to be sport, could be music, could be dance, could be a number of things. But where are those spaces? Where are the rehab programs for boys and men who grew up with violence? And how do they unlearn what has been conditioned into them, right? It takes time, man. You know, like, I grew up with violence, and I grew up with a lot of emotional abuse, and I'm not proud to say, but in my early relationships, while I've never ever been physically violent, I would say horrible things when I would argue with my partners. Not routinely, and not to control them, but to, in hindsight, to win and to be dominant in that moment of disagreement. And I really regret that. And I'm sad about the things I've said to, you know, just a couple of partners over the years. You know, it hasn't been a routine thing, but I do have to acknowledge that I've said nasty things, and I learned that from what I witnessed. And I've had to go on to learn how not to be a fucking asshole when I'm upset. You know, like, arguing is a normal part of a relationship. Men and women do it. We all can raise our voices. We can all sometimes lose our cool. That's normal, right? But we also need to understand that there are better ways of doing that. And unfortunately, it's quite difficult to figure out how to do that if it's never been shown to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really think culture could do a lot to mainstream healthy relationships if we advertised it the way that we advertise other things. You know what I mean? Imagine if every Instagram influencer, instead of showing you their new premix alcohol, was like, yo, so there's this fucking dope course that you could do on like non-violent verbal communication, you know, like conflict resolution or some shit, you know?
And it ends up being a massive cycle, because when men especially men, try to get the help they feel, it goes back to that first sense of don't show your emotions, you know, compress them, don't express them, don't be a softie, harden up, don't be a pussy, and it just ends up being a massive cycle. So I fully agree, there needs to be more push for stuff like that. There's a course, there's someone you can talk to, you know, there's call this number, it's free 24/7, you know, you're not a pussy, and I love to push a lot saying you're actually stronger when you express how you're feeling.
Hard. Yeah.
Like, and it's I remember it's been so young, especially growing up west as well, is you see it all around you. Like, the main reason I started this is because I had some of my mates who came to me telling me how they were feeling. First time they'd ever said that. Never said that in their households, never said that to their cousins, to their siblings. I was the first person they expressed how they were feeling. And for so many years, expressing it through primary, through intermediate, how I was feeling. You know, some days I'd be sad, so I'd have a cry because everything built up from my personal life. And it's that so you're a pussy, you know, you're gay for crying, you're a girl. It starts so early on, and it only spirals on until adulthood. So it's so powerful what you said there, and I wish we did see it more. You know, it's amazing how many more people are saying there is help if you need it, come here if you need help. But I just wish it was so much more on a larger level, and so less still frowned upon to get help.
Yeah. I think it's cool young guys like yourself are having conversations like this, right? When I was 19, that was never a feature of society at all. You know, and if you are watching this, maybe you are having problems in your relationship, there's a number called 0800 Hey Bro that people can check out if they feel they need to talk to someone in order to heal your relationship, well, to learn to be non-violent, like in your communication or even physically, right? But you're right, we have a long way to go, right? Like, we still valorize, you know, as much as I love sports and I love combat sports, we still valorize athleticism above everything else for men, right?
Yeah.
Like, you ever see like a mathematician on an Instagram ad, or like an influencer who's I don't know, a dude but good at baking? Although that said, when I think about it, there's that cat, How to Dad.
Yes.
I forget. I've met him. I shook his hand once somewhere, but that dude, and dudes like that, that's fucking cool.
Heck yes.
Because like that is breaking down these stereotypes. He's just a regular bro, but he's clearly like really involved in his children's life.
Yep.
And we need more men to understand that parenting is parents' work, not woman's work. Yep. Does that make
100%.
sense?
Yeah, sure.
And it's good for the father, and it's good for the children.
Yep.
You know, like little girls who don't have fathers in their life, like research will tell you, like go through puberty earlier, more likely to have teenage pregnancy, more likely to have like a string of like unhealthy relationships. You know, I work with women from prison every week, and we've had conversations that they found themselves in relationships with men who are physically violent and abusive on the extreme end of things, like things that most people don't experience, right? Because it very much recreated either their own father's violence towards their mothers, or, you know, the sort of like patterns of violence that they were accustomed to, right? Or they filled the space of where a father could have been with like the wrong sort of men.
Yeah.
You know, like little girls need dads, and little boys need dads who are going to show them that it's all right to be vulnerable and be emotional, as much as be responsible, be a stand-up dude, look out for one another, you know? Like, not everything that we think about when we think about masculinity, leadership, self-responsibility, looking after your physical health, looking after people around you, an interest in sports. Like, none of these things, that's not an inherently bad thing. You know, like, being, like, wanting to get laid is that's a human thing, right?
Yep.
But it's when you think that's the only pathway to acceptable manhood, right? I've got to sleep around and brag about it. I've got to smash dudes over.
Yep.
Got to kick the ball far. Like, got to drive my fucking powerful car fast.
Yeah.
If that's all you think being a man is, I promise you, man, you're going to have problems. Like, you really need to learn to step outside of that. And the brothers need to give each other permission to step outside 100%, of that. You know? And that's changing, bro. Like, there are more and more men in positions of influence who are like, yo, man, I struggle with my mental health. I had depression. I went through a divorce and this happened.
Yeah.
Like, my dad was like this and I've worked really hard to be like this. Like, I'm a dad. And like, it's changing. I think we need to understand that for all the doom and gloom, media doesn't give enough focus on change and hope. But things will get better. We just need to keep doing it, and I would say do it more. Yeah,
there is a lot more positive standards being set. You know, exactly like you said, is you know, it's masculinity. The whole stereotype when you grow up is you do what your dad does. You know, if your dad's not there, you be the man of the house. Especially in New Zealand, you want to grow up to be an All Black and play for your country, or you be a farmer, or you be a tradie. You know, that's the stereotype in the country and around the world. That's the same thing as exactly what you said. You know, you need to have that power. You need to be dominant. You need to be in control. And you hear with R&B and rappers, you know, all these rappers calling girls hoes and all this hoes and money and all this stuff. I literally just spent 2.5 years
writing about that.
Yeah, and
that's what my thesis
that's
on.
really insane, is because young males will grow up and those are the standards that will be set in the house. Yeah, especially with no male figure in their house or no positive role model in their house, male figures. That's the standard they're going to meet. That's going to be the expectations they're going to meet, and it's going to become the reality. Like we said before, it's just, in some ways, it's just going to be a continuous cycle that we need to break and get a wedge in there and say, hey, bro, you know, you need to stop. You need to take a step back and look at what you're doing and actually think about it. You know, don't get on the piss every weekend. You know, that's not good for you. Save some money. It's okay to stay in home with your partner and have a movie night and do all the stuff that, you know, is girly, you know, that well,
it's not girly, but that's
how it's portrayed. That's
exactly
how it's portrayed. Bro. So people shy away from it. And I would love to ask is do you have any advice off the top of your head for young males, especially who may be trying to find themselves or be comfortable with who they are?
Yeah, I think you got to find your tribe, you know, which can be kind of hard, to be honest. Like, but if you find like minds, everything's easier. You know, like. You know, I grew up out West Auckland, man. Like, if you're watching this and you're not in West Auckland, New Zealand, think of like a working class sort of bogan fucking neighborhood where fist fights and binge drinking and powerful cars are cultural capital.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You're a lot younger than me and it's still the same.
Yep.
Because I teach kickboxing, right? I train young men and women. But a lot of young guys come through the gym knocked out teeth or whatever. They got on the same shit we were doing when I was a teenager, still happening now 20 years later, right? And it's sad. So I would say be mindful of who you're hanging out with. Be aware that the fucking coolest people in the world are the ones who did things differently, right? Whether that's Colin Kaepernick or Rosa Parks or I don't know Ian McKay or I don't know, like Sid Vicious, you know, like whoever it is, like the people I've always admired aren't the people who just went with the flow. They're the people who had the courage to stand up for something different, right? And be a bit countercultural. And you know, that's hard. Don't get me wrong. Like I had a lot of teasing and like didn't really fit in a lot.
Yep.
Even now, I've found, you know, with my political beliefs and ideological views, they're constantly evolving, and I always feel like I'm a little bit out of step of what everyone else is thinking, and I've had to like navigate that a lot as I've gotten older. You know, like my academic background's politics, and I used to be involved in a little bit of like political advocacy and all this sort of shit. But I've always tried to like think critically and not just go with the flow, and often that feels kind of lonely. Yeah, it does. So if you're watching this and you're like, yeah, I don't want to feel lonely, it's about building practices in your life so that you can live with that. Like you have to like build yourself from the inside out. Like we've been talking about social media and stuff today, and that's a lot of external searching for validation, attention and likes and blah, blah, blah. Hey, look at me. I'm worth something if you like me. And then you perform to the crowd and you actually can lose yourself, right? It's not just social media that does that. There's lots of avenues in life where people are solely performative at the expense of who they really are. So you need to put practices in your life that let you be cool with that, right? Like whether it's meditation, seeing a psychologist, a spiritual practice, physical discipline, I would say probably all of those things, like reading widely and broadly, being knowledgeable, all those things help yourself, and that's a lot of work, but ultimately I think that's a true investment in a life that's worth living, really. Otherwise you wake up fucking 45, which is pretty close for me, or 50 or whatever, and you're like, what have I fucking done with my time? I've just done what everyone else wanted. I'm not happy.
Yeah.
I don't want to be where I'm at. Like, this has not been an intentional life. I've just done what I should have been expected of me, and yeah, I think that's sad. I think a lot of people live lives of quiet desperation and they forget about it every weekend because they party or they shop or whatever sort of escapist tool they may use. But our figures around mental illness, and I think other symptoms in society, when we think about the increasingly radical politics which come across our news feeds, I think they're all symptomatic of this inner anomie, this inner sense of like a loss and a grief for what could have been,
Yeah.
That's like on an individual level, but I think societally we unfortunately are increasingly like atomized, right? And everything's very individual, and we need to come back to some sort of like, a collective human consciousness. I'm just fucking making this up.
Oh, you're good.
But where we can see one another's humanity, but at the same time give space within that we're all human and have empathy and love for one another, to allow like some degree of individuality within that. Does that make sense? Yep. I guess also what I'm trying to articulate is that what's culturally normal isn't what's culturally healthy. That's what I'm trying to say. So how do we help all these interconnected village community of people shift what is culturally dominant? That's what I'm trying to say, right?
Yep. Well, back to what the first thing you said about the tribe is, when it comes to finding your people, I think a lot of people, and I've heard this a lot, and I can't remember who said it, but we become someone we're not. We become someone we're not in hopes of finding people. And I think the most beautiful and beneficial and healthy thing to do is live your life as the person you are. Don't try and meet other people's expectations. Don't try be the person other people want you to be. Be who you want to be and be what's right for you. And the people that are right for you, you will attract. You'll subconsciously put it out into the universe, and that will bring forth the people who are going to help push you towards your goals or your dreams, or become the person you want to be, have the same wavelength as you and mindset, and run on the same road as you do. And it is really, and I got stuck in the trap for so long, which was being someone I wasn't meant to be just to gain acceptance from people around me. Being able to go joke with that group, or be friends with that group, or be friends with the cool guys, and I've later found out that wasn't me. I put on this persona of being someone who I wasn't, just to get acceptance from these people who in the long run had no interests, weren't the same. We didn't like anything the same. We didn't enjoy the same things. I preferred to be out driving my truck on the weekend, or out going for a run, and they'll be at home drinking a box of piss and listening to loud music and being up till 4 a.m. Like, it didn't correlate to who I wanted to be. So when I stepped back, I took a long look at myself and I said, no, like, this isn't what you want to do. You don't want to fall back into this path. You need to just do what you want to do. Go against the grain of salt and do what you want to do, and speak up and be honest about who you are and what you've been through. Only then will you find the right people. When you're true to yourself, you're true to who you are, the people around you will become true.
Yeah, I think that's broadly true. I think it does. Yeah, I think we have to understand, like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to grow and change.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but at the same time, don't pretend that you're someone you're not.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you have been a former Muay Thai champ, retired now, as you said. You were a fighter now to a trainer. 25 years of fighting, and yeah. Will you get back in the ring? Because I know sometimes even when you watch like a game of a sport on TV, you want to be on the field playing again. Like,
yeah, no, I miss fighting a lot.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of times I've almost come out of retirement. I was in Thailand once, and but then I got sick. Yeah, because I used to go train and fight in Thailand.
Yep.
And it's easier over there in some ways because you've got nothing else to do except for train, no other responsibilities. Would I ever get back in the ring? Yeah, you know, like it would have to be in the next year or two because I'm getting old. But and for like a charity or something.
Yeah, get you.
You know,
yeah. Like a fight for life kind
yeah,
of scene.
fight for life.
Yeah.
Wanted me to box someone. I'd be up for that.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah. No, I would never like come back to like full time trying to chase anything.
Yeah.
There's no money in Muay Thai. I had an MMA fight in Japan 10 years ago, and I was always like, I'd be good to get one win in MMA. But again, like, because I've had so many Muay Thai fights, it's not like I can just fight some guy who's had no.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I get you. Yeah.
And you know, I haven't fought for 10 years. Like, there's a real reality of like ring rust, and I'm much older, and my body's full of old injuries, right?
Yeah.
So I think the longer you're out, unless you're getting paid a stupid amount of money, you know, I love the buzz of fighting, but like I go spar the boys, have a good, you know, knock heads, and I feel good. You know? Yeah. You can't really, I think, be like a high level coach as well with 2 children and really give all of that justice if you're fighting at a high level, unless you are getting proper money. Like, you know, Dan Hooker's getting proper money. Israel Adesanya's like could retire now, you know?
Yeah.
That's not my reality, you know? Yeah.
I get you.
But I like, you know, like I said, if it was a good cause, you know, if Simon Bridges wanted to fight me, I'd be up for it for a good cause, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, you know where to come, Simon.
All
now,
love, bro. Yeah.
I'd love to hand it over to you now. I would like you just to chuck anything out to the universe, you know, anything you feel needs to be said, any advice you may have, anything that's helped you on your journey.
Anything that's helped me on my journey. I think I would have covered most of that, really, man.
Yeah.
I don't know, bro. You're really young, man. And when I was your age, I was nowhere near as confident as you are. Like, there are a lot of opportunities that I didn't take because I was insecure, right? I met a lot of famous people, like really famous people in my life. I did radio for a long time. I traveled around the world, hung out with heaps of people, and like I've had opportunities that I didn't take, whether that's through a whole range of things because I was too. I didn't have the self-belief, right? So I'd encourage you guys to kind of do what you're doing, Jack, and just ask. You know, like, I think it's really admirable what you're doing. And if you're watching this and you want to be someone or be someone different, or not in the way that we've been talking about for a conformist sense, but because you're not satisfied where you are and you want to be somewhere else, take some risks and, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway. The worst thing that you're imagining probably will never happen, right? Like, if you take a risk, chances are that it might work out way better than you could ever imagine, you know? Don't let your imagination, your anxiety, and your self-doubt stop you from growing and doing cool things. I did that a lot, and while I love my life and it's very rich and full and it's been very interesting, and there are other things that I look back on and I held myself back. I guess what I'm trying to say in a lot of words is don't get in the way of yourself. You know, figure out how to overcome your nervousness or your fear, or, you know, worrying about being rejected, and just do it anyway and see where it lands.
Oh, that take the risk or lose the chance.
Yeah, bro, hard.
Well, thank you for that, mate. And I genuinely appreciate you coming on the podcast, and thank you for your time. And
oh, you're welcome. I'm
words,
very
mate.
impressed by you.
Thank you. Well, I know there'll be a lot of takeaways from this conversation, and very admirable. And like I said off camera, is you're very well spoken, and the message you put out there and continue to put out there, you should be very proud of yourself for that, mate.
I am.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Cheers, man. Appreciate it.
Love you, mate. Now, as always, guys, I love you very much. Look after yourself. There's always a line open if you need. There's no silly questions in the world. You know, ask questions to better yourself, and always remember to take the risk or lose a chance. Until next week, remember to do what you know is right, do what makes you happy, and do what you need to do for yourself. See you later. Love is love.